Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our July Community Coffee Hour. I am going to very briefly share my screen here, and then we're going to turn it over to the real reason that we're all here as quickly as possible. So for those who are not as familiar with us, we're Mentor Virginia. Our mission is to foster quality mentoring relationships that empower, elevate, and encourage young people. We offer training, we do consulting through technical assistance, and that is with a partnership with the National Mentoring Resource Center and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. We also provide AmeriCorps Vista, and we do the National Quality Mentoring System. I am here with my team today. We have Jennifer Boyle, our Executive Director. We have Natalie Foster, our Director of Programs and Partnerships. Vanessa Reyes, our Director of the AmeriCorps program, and then I am the Programs Manager. And we also have a wonderful team of trainers and consultants, some of who will be joining us today as well. And without further ado, I want to, introduce our guest speaker today. We have Mike Garringer, who's the Director of Research and Evaluation with Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I will say that he is kind enough to join us today all the way from the West Coast. So it is about 6 a.m. his time. So we're very, very grateful for him to join us. And Mike, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Yes, my apologies if I sound a little incoherent this morning. I'm still drinking some coffee and waking up, but I think we can get through this together. So I appreciate everyone joining this morning. I was asked to talk to you all about the topic of program evaluation and kind of how we can measure our mentoring work in ways that are meaningful, not only for us as program staff and helping us improve what we do, but maybe prove to our constituents that we're doing a good job of supporting young people and whatever it is they need support with, and hopefully over time, bending the program in ways that not only work well for us as professionals in the field, but meet the needs of young people and our communities a little bit better. So I do have some slides I'm going to share here. Let's see. So bear with me while I get the Zoom technology. You'd think after a year and a half of doing Zoom meetings, all this would be second nature, but okay, can everyone see those slides fairly well? Okay, great. I am okay being interrupted with questions as I go here. If I say something that is unclear, but I think I'm going to talk for maybe 20-ish minutes here, get through some kind of core ideas, and then I think we've got a lot of time for Q&A and things like that. So you can certainly hold questions till the end if you'd like, but
Mike, I'm so sorry. I think I muted you on accident.
Oh, no worries. No worries. I was just saying that I'm okay being interrupted with questions as we go, but I think we'll have plenty of time today for discussion and questions. So you can also just wait till the end of this presentation. So let's dive into it here. As you can see, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what are some core principles, some new trends that I see emerging in mentoring program evaluation. And then we'll spend a lot of time talking about different tools that you all can access that will help you do this work kind of regardless of where you're at on your kind of program evaluation journey. I just covered this. Like I said, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, but certainly want to make sure you've got some tools and resources that you can actually use once this meeting is done. So let's really talk about what I consider to be kind of the 4 core principles of program evaluation. I think, just as a little bit of framing, I think as a field, I feel, I've been in mentoring for a quarter century now. I hate saying that out loud because it makes me feel super old, but I've been around this profession for a while, and I've seen a lot of growth around the topic of evaluation and kind of outcome tracking and the ways that we're trying to make the argument that mentoring is effective. And I think we know more about the art of doing this work than we ever have before. I see programs being much more mature in how they think about evaluation and the level of kind of quality that they do when they examine their services. So we know a lot about what mentoring is good at and what mentoring may not be so good at in isolation. I think oftentimes mentoring needs to be combined with other services and supports to be as effective as for young people as we hope. But we certainly know a lot about the actions that staff take that facilitate results in programs. A lot of our work at Mentor and Mentor Virginia is about exactly that. So things like the elements of effective practice and the national quality mentoring system work. I mean, we know kind of the nuts and bolts of running a program. They need to be customized, obviously, for every unique situation and circumstance, but we know a lot about this through research and through a lot of evaluation efforts. We also know a lot of things at the mentor level. I'm not going to talk about it much today, but Mentor is about to come out with in the fall a new resource that we're calling the Elements of Effective Practice for Mentors. So not at that program staff level, but down at the level of there's always, some adult sitting there with a kid trying to figure out what is it we're going to do, what is it we're going to work on and talk about, how can I best support you as a young person. We know a lot about that. And so we're producing a really cool kind of research informed publication down at the mentor level as well. And like I said, we've learned also some limitations and challenges that come with this work. So we've been doing evaluation for a long time in this field and research and have learned a lot. But I think for you all as folks who run programs, the best research that you will ever find is the research you do yourself about the effectiveness of what it is you're doing in your program. So just because we know all these things, I think, as I just said, knowing them for your program is essential. And I always like this cartoon. They're howling at the moon, wondering if it's having an impact. And, over the last year and a half of the pandemic, I know a lot of colleagues in this field have said sentiments like this to me. It's like, we had a good program, things were going great, and now under these circumstances, I don't know if we're making the difference that we think we are. So I think right now is especially an important time to be doing evaluation work, not only to see are you helping young people in the ways that they need, but just, are there things that you can learn from this pandemic? I mean, everyone became an instant expert on e-mentoring over the last year and a half, assuming you did social distancing. So there are things even in times of crisis that you can learn about this work and carry forward in your program. So here are the 4 components that I always suggest folks consider when thinking about evaluation. I've presented them here as a sequence, and I think there is a bit of a logical sequence here, but I think depending on your program's history and how long you've been around and how many of these pieces you may have done in the past, you can kind of skip around in this, but I'll go through each of these here. I do want to point folks to this kind of key resource here at the bottom of the page. A lot of the content I'm going to present here, you can find kind of much more robust discussions of each of these things in a resource we did a year or so ago called Getting Started with Program Evaluation. It's a little e-learning module, like a little self-paced tutorial that you can click through. If you're not tired of this voice by the end of this presentation, I do a little introduction video to each of the sections of it, kind of explaining what you'll learn. And then there's content that you kind of click through and learn a little bit more deeply in these 4 areas. I'm going to go through them here kind of in order and explain kind of what we mean by each and some resources that will help you do each of these stages. So all of this really, I think, starts with having a strong logic model and theory of change for your program. And I can honestly tell you that I think from the most mom and pop grassroots organization you can think of, all the way up through some of the national nonprofits in our space, every time I see a mentoring program not hit the mark in its evaluation, where they do all of this, evaluation work, and then the outcomes aren't quite what they were hoping for young people, you can often see the seeds of that disappointment in their logic model and their theory of change. Like, are they articulating? Have they understood what it is they're trying to do with young people? I see a lot of what I call hope and pray theories of change in our field, where it's like, oh, we're getting these kids a mentor, therefore their grades will improve. Like, well, how are the mentors teaching study habits and homework skills? Are they trying to solve attendance problems and just simply get kids to the classroom more often? Are they addressing other barriers and advocating for young people within the system of school? Are they working with parents in some way to ensure better academic support at home? Well, I don't know. They talk about the importance of school and therefore it's going to work, right? Well, no, you have to kind of connect the dots of what more exactly you're trying to accomplish within the very broad category of doing better in school, just as one example. So I really encourage programs to spend a lot of time refining these, and you'll never get it perfect, right? You'll always be learning something about what kids want or need, or what the limitations of your volunteers to deliver certain things to young people. So think of these as living documents, right? The broad difference between the two is, I think, a logic model describes more how your organization works, the mechanics of you as a nonprofit or a school or a for-profit, whatever you happen to be. What are the things we do? What are the inputs into that? What are the activities that we all do, including our mentors and mentees? And then what does that result in? The theory of change, I think, at least in my mind, has always gotten more into what's happening for that young person. I mean, there's still inputs into that, and there's still the role of activities within the mentoring relationship are often represented in here. But this gets a little bit more granular around that kind of sequence of change that we think a young person would go through. So if you want, say, to use that better grades example on the end, well, maybe my first step is I need to work on some attitudes and beliefs about school, or that young person's belief that they can be a good student, or that has meaning to them. So there may be intrinsic motivation things that I need to work on. I then may need to, once I've got them re-engaged, do some tutoring and some teaching of study skills and some practical things that will help them succeed better in the classroom. I may need to encourage them to go get supports if they've got learning disabilities that are going unaddressed, right? So connecting to other services. In the end, we get to the better grades that we would have wanted, but I have put more thought into that kind of pathway that will get us there. That's what I often see represented in a theory of change. And these two documents really drive what you will evaluate when you go to evaluate your program. So they really kind of are the engine that will drive all the other activities we talk about here. There's a great resource here, I'll note, on the National Mentoring Resource Center website. We did a series of sample logic models and theory change for a number of different kind of common program types. So you'll see a couple of school-based ones in there. You'll see a group mentoring model. You'll see kind of a one-to-one community-based model, several others in there. I think this coming year we'll be producing a tool that will allow you to kind of make your own using the templates up there, but certainly they're downloadable as Word documents, or actually I think they might be PowerPoint slides, but they're editable to that point. So if you want something that's a starting point that you could kind of maybe tweak and add your own language to, I highly recommend these if you don't have one at all. So implementation evaluation. This is the part of evaluation that everyone always wants to skip over in the pursuit of outcomes, right? And there's a good reason you want to look at those outcomes. It's the whole point of your program is, are we actually moving the needle on what these children need help with? I get that. But I can tell you that almost every evaluation I've ever read that had poor results, you can see the seeds of that failure in the implementation of it. I won't name the program, but there was a prominent evaluation that came out last year of a very well-known mentoring program that did not achieve a single outcome that they were looking for, like not one. And, not a death sentence for a program, but certainly not good news at the end of a long evaluation cycle. But as you read through that report, you can just see that they had trouble implementing it. They had to be very honest. Kids were not participating nearly at the level that they wanted them to. They offered a bunch of ongoing activities and supports during summer months that were sparsely attended. Mentors weren't quite delivering what they were supposed to deliver in the meetings. And so really figuring out, are you running the program that you say you are in real life, right? Everyone has a nice policy and procedure manual that talks about what you should be doing. Well, are you actually doing those things, right? You'll read evaluations where, 25% of the mentors never completed their training. And it's like, oh my, how is that even possible? But certainly if that training is important, it would explain why maybe things didn't work out. This is very helpful, I think, early in program life cycles. So if you're a brand new program, I always say, do not do an outcome evaluation until you've worked through the kinks of implementation, right? Like how it takes a while to figure out kind of what is the optimal way of running a program. And that can take a while to get to with staffing changes, funding fluctuations. I mean, it can be hard to kind of get to a point where you feel like, yeah, the machine is running as it should. But I think if you look for outcomes too prematurely, you can perhaps feel like this model is not as successful as it could be. So I really encourage programs to think about this step early in their history, but I think even established programs can benefit from this. You can always find efficiencies in what it is you're delivering. You can always find better ways of doing things. New curriculum, new activities, new check-in procedures with matches, whatever it may be, there's always something that you can be studying to see, are we running this more effectively than we did in the past? I think this is also important to do in combination with looking at outcomes, because oftentimes you will find if the outcomes look strong, you can see, well, what are the elements of this program that perhaps made it successful. If you get bad results, like I said, you can often find what went wrong along the way and fix it. And so that maybe the next time you look at your outcomes, it looks a little stronger. So that resource I mentioned earlier on kind of the basics of program evaluation has a very robust section in here about the types of questions you can ask. A lot of this is just managing the consistency of the delivery, the participation by your mentors, parents, youth in what you're offering, and then quality, right? So you could get all your mentors to all of your ongoing trainings, but if they rate those trainings as a 2 out of 5, you've got a problem there that needs some addressing. So really encourage folks to do this almost on an annual basis, set some benchmarks of what good delivery looks like and do that. The third thing I always suggest is looking inside the black box of the mentoring relationship itself. Your staff could be doing all the right things. Your mentors could be, putting in their best effort. Same with the young people. But a lot of times, it's hard to make matches that have that compatibility, right? And so I really encourage folks to do some measurement of what's going on inside those relationships. You'll see some work from John here about, there's different ways to measure relationship quality. You can kind of look at the internal qualities of it. Are they relating well to one another? There's also kind of this idea of instrumental help. Are you doing the practical things that I need you to do as my mentor? If I want to go to college next year and you're not taking me on college visits and you're not helping me fill out my FAFSA paperwork, this might not be a good mentoring relationship for me, right? I need more than just a friend sometimes. There are some other pieces here you can look around the match structure and even external things like are are parents and caregivers playing the role they need to play in making the relationship work. But I just wanted to share this little framework here. I think it's a good way of thinking about relationship quality. And then some tools for this. I really recommend a tool that you'll find on the National Mentoring Resource Center website called the Measurement Guidance Toolkit. I'll talk about some other sections of this in a minute, but this has a really great section on measuring relationship quality with a number of tools that you can just download and use. They're all available, I believe, as most of them are Word docs. There's some holistic ones in there that look at many characteristics of relationships. There's some ones that drill down on some specific facets of it, such as, does this adult and young person, do they have a good working alliance, right? So there's a theory that maybe we don't need to be BFFs in this relationship. We just need to get along well enough to do the work of the program. And then we have a category that we didn't know what to call. We just called it specific facets of relationships. It kind of didn't fit into the other categories. Things like, is my mentor culturally responsive? Or if I'm in a group mentoring program, a really good measure of group dynamics. So are all the people in that group, with multiple kids and a mentor, is everyone getting along with everyone else? And there's a tool that can help you measure that. I really encourage folks to think about what it is you want to see in those relationships, right? Is emotional closeness really important? Is it that they're getting through the curriculum that you have for them? Think about what characteristics would mean a successful match in your program. Chances are the tools here would help you measure that. So let's talk about outcome evaluation here. And I think what I see most programs doing, and it's okay, is what I would call more outcomes monitoring. We do some kind of pre-survey when young people enter the program or at the beginning of the program year. And then we do a post-survey when they exit the program or at the end of the cycle, whatever it may be. And we'd like to see improvement on whatever those items are. We might also be looking at records, things like grades or attendance or juvenile arrest data, like whatever may be relevant to your program. And we're tracking that for the kids in our program. And that's fine. That can kind of help you figure out some really good basic things about your program. Are the kids who show up more seeming to do better in certain subjects, right? But I think if you want to do true kind of what I would call impact evaluation, you need to start moving towards more experimental designs. And I won't go deeply into that, but I think almost all those experimental designs where you're attempting to show some kind of causation, that it was our program that made this change and not some other factor, you're going to need a comparison group or a control group of some kind. That's the reason, that's the gold standard in our field is you have to say, if everyone's grades go up, well, did the grades go up for all the kids in the school? It might be because they have a new math teacher and a new math curriculum. It wasn't the work of the mentors at all that boosted those grades. So you need something to compare your mentored young people to. If you're just relying on correlations, you can get weird things like this. I always use this slide taken from a website. I'm not sure the website's around anymore, but it used to be called Spurious Correlations. And it would show correlations that were statistically very spot on, but had nothing to do with each other, right? So consumption of mozzarella cheese and civil engineering PhDs awarded. This trend held up for almost a decade, right? But it doesn't mean those two things are related. So I really encourage folks to use comparison groups, control groups if they can. That's an expensive form of evaluation, so I don't think you want to do that kind of evaluation very often. It also, there's some ethical things. It does involve recruiting more kids to the program if you're doing like a random control trial evaluation, and then you got to deny half of them services, right? And so in some programs, I think there's even ethical considerations around whether that's something that you want to do. But you can always find a comparison group, whether that's kids at the next school over that are very similar to the kids you're serving, or young people in the next town over, or whatever it may be. You can often find a group to compare your mentees to, but If you're not comparing them to anybody, it's tough to know whether it was your program that made the difference for them. So I've got just a few tips here for examining outcomes, and then I'll wrap this up quick so we can have some Q&A and discussion time. I often find programs when they do evaluations, they want to just look at every outcome under the sun and well, maybe we're having an impact on healthy sex behaviors and drug use and grades and peer relationships. And let's just look at all of it. Well, that's okay. You can do that. But I think I often see programs that shoot, like let's look at 20 outcomes and they hit on only 3 of them, right? It looks like 17 things you failed at, right? Whereas if you maybe looked at 5 and get 3 of them, then maybe, hey, that looks a little more impressive. So I would say it's okay to look for outcomes in a bunch of categories, but really, if you go back to that theory of change, there should be some pretty specific things that you would be looking for as outcomes of your work. I also think it's helpful to choose outcomes that are like more close in time to young people's participation in the program. Unfortunately, we know that the further out from a mentoring relationship young people get, the effect of that relationship kind of wanes over time. They can certainly get other mentors down the road and keep those gains going, but Gene Rhodes, the famous scholar, always says mentoring is like a vitamin. It works while you're taking it, right? And so, you may be working with middle schoolers and hoping that that leads to higher high school graduation rates, but once they leave your program in 8th grade or something, a lot can happen in those next 4 years, and you probably shouldn't be taking credit for them, nor should you get blamed if things fall apart after they leave your doors. So I think always looking for outcomes that are directly related to the work you've done and that are kind of measurable, closer to that experience rather than further away. Doesn't mean you can't survey your alumni down the road and see how they're doing, but I think it's always safer, I think, to measure closer to the work. I always encourage folks also to do what's called intent to treat kind of approaches, where if half of the young people drop out of your program mid-year, those should be counted as people you attempted to serve, right? Don't just track the outcomes of the folks who made it through the whole year. There's probably some selection bias in that group, right? But the fact is your program attempted to serve 100% of the kids, not the 50% that persisted. So doesn't mean that they left your program for reasons related to the quality. It could have been just a bunch of them moved away or something, but there's a concept here called intent to treat from kind of public health models where if the idea is to serve this group of people, you got to measure how well you serve them in a holistic way. A plug here to work with external evaluators when you can. Grad students and others looking for real world practical experience are always a good and cheap option on this compared to hiring some private evaluation firm. But certainly I think as the level of rigor goes up that you're doing with your evaluation, having a real professional help you with this. It'll also just mean less work for your staff. I see a lot of programs attempting to do this using nothing but the willpower and elbow grease of their staff. Well, they've already got jobs. They're running your program. So bringing in external help to do this is helpful. I also think it's important to look at subgroup findings, right? So I see a lot of evaluations where maybe for all of the kids, the program had a okay effect, but boy, this one group of young people was really benefiting. That could be boys, that could be first generation students, it could be whoever. You often find that this is really working for some kids and not for others. So I always think it's important to break down those findings. And then I think more than anything, just have reasonable expectations around what your program can achieve and take a continuous improvement approach. No program is ever getting this exactly right at all times. So use evaluation as a tool to kind of continuously improve. That measurement guidance toolkit I mentioned has a lot of good measures for looking at outcomes. I already talked about the relationship characteristics, but we have measures that are downloadable and ready to use in all of the categories that you see here. everything from mental health down to academics and interpersonal relationships, problem behaviors. The risk and protective factors that could be used for looking at outcomes, but it also is a lot of stuff that can help you get a handle on who's coming in the door to be in your program. So a lot of surveys that could measure things about the home life that young people have, things about their needs, that type of thing. So there's probably about 40 downloadable measurement tools in that toolkit, along with a bunch of other good guidance doing this work. So I'm going to very quickly talk about trends and key emerging outcomes. And I promise, Sarah, I'll do this quickly. Needless to say, the last year and a half has not been just about a pandemic. There's also been a lot of conversation and activism around racial justice, social justice in this country. And that has bled over into our mentoring movement. I think there's a real desire to use mentoring, not just to help individual children, but to think about how can we use mentoring to address root causes, the reasons that young people wind up in our mentoring programs in the first place, right? What can we do to use this work to change society and to make things better in our communities, right? And so I'm seeing a lot of mentoring programs shifting their work to be more about this. Yes, we're still helping you get good grades and achieve your dreams and whatever else you need help with, but can we think about how to use this beyond just the individual, right? I think concepts like participatory action research can really help with this. It'll ask, members of a community and participants in a program what it is you want to get out of this rather than what some funder thinks kids need to get out of it, right? So these types of things that can empower the voices of your participants and align what you're doing towards what they think is important, not just for their own lives, but about their community. I think that can be really powerful. If you ever wanted to measure outcomes around this type of thing, I really recommend this Search Institute publication here. I have used measures from this toolkit in my own work, tracking kind of the advocacy beliefs and skills of young people. Some great scales in here about how kids think about politicians, like do politicians care about us, that type of thing. But other scales around, just their engagement as young leaders, right? Like there's measures of I think I can activate my friends to, help promote a cause or something like that. So if you're doing that kind of justice and community change work with young people, really highly recommend that tool. You'll also hear a lot of buzz these days around helping kids build networks of support, recognizing that just one mentor isn't enough to maybe meet all of a young person's needs. There's also a lot of work around what folks call social capital. I tend to not use that term as much. It implies that young people that come to programs already don't have people in their lives that are helping them, right? But I think networks of support, webs of support, these are terms that I think are being increasingly embraced by even one-to-one programs, or finally at a point where it's like, hey, this one mentor for an hour a week is not going to solve everything. So how can we build a more robust group of people? And not just the volume of people, right? You'll see there's kind of these four aspects of this, right? The quantity certainly matters, but the quality of the young people, or the people that young people know, right? I may know a lot of adults, but they may not be able to offer me very much. So who's in that network? What's the composition of it? And do I have the ability as a young person to tap into it? I might know folks that could help me, but maybe I don't feel the agency myself to go out and ask for that help from them. I really recommend this Christensen Institute publication. It's got a number of kind of questions you can put into surveys of young people to kind of measure, do they have these networks, and how could they perhaps grow them? Other key measures in our work, I won't go deep into these, but I am seeing folks asking a lot about social emotional learning characteristics. I think identity development and belonging are key. We're about to come out with a new research agenda at Mentor that we hope will drive the next decade of mentoring research. the top item in that is more research around identity development and helping kids feel like they belong in this world. I don't care what the focus of your program is, if young people are not learning a little bit about who they are as individuals, and if they don't feel safe and like they belong in this world, you're probably not going to achieve any of your other outcomes, right? So I'm a big fan of these kind of more human-centric outcomes, things like happiness and life satisfaction, hopefulness for the future. I almost never see this measured in a mentoring evaluation. It's always grades and did you keep out of trouble with the law? And those are important things, right? But they matter to policymakers, right? Like that's a social solutionist view of mentoring. I prefer a view that says you as an individual, are you happier than when you walked through the doors of this program? Do you feel better about your life? Do you feel like you belong in your community? Do you feel safe? These are measures that I think are increasingly important in our work. So, and the last thing I will plug here, and then I will stop talking. I really encourage programs, if you want to take a deep dive on the quality of your work, the National Quality Mentoring System, it's a simple self-assessment process followed by a lot of coaching and a lot of support from Mentor Virginia and all of our affiliates at Mentor. This really can help you figure out, are we running the best program we can and where do we need to improve? A couple of articles here that I think help make this case. This article by Stoger and colleagues, Key Issues in Professionalizing Mentoring Practices. They lay out 7 things that our field kind of struggles to do in doing this work better. And I think the QMS system that we do addresses like 5 of those 7 things, right? So I think there's even a good theoretical basis for looking at your program in that way. And then the last thing I'll note is Tim Cavell and some colleagues came out with a paper a few months back. I can send a copy to anyone who would like to see this if you can't find it online. They really talk about kind of the future of this field, in that we have gone so far into that solutionist mindset of like, oh, let's use mentoring to combat gun violence and the opioid crisis, and our schools aren't working, so let's put a mentor on it, right? And that's okay. We can use mentoring as a tool of kind of social institutional improvement. But they also note that the thing that mentoring seems to be best at is just giving kids love and support and an adult that they didn't have who's in their corner, and kind of more of those human-centered outcomes that I just mentioned. They make a very strong case in this paper that programs may want to think about whether they slot more into that kind of broad humanistic view of mentoring, or whether they are more kind of a problem-oriented program. Doesn't mean that you can't dabble in both, but chances are your program is either providing broad holistic support, or it sits more in this niche thing that's addressing a very specific problem. Needless to say, that will have huge implications for how you evaluate your work. And I think they make the argument that a lot of people have been doing this humanistic work, but looking for outcomes that are kind of these very tight problem areas, and there's a bit of a mismatch there. And so I encourage folks, if you want some good food for thought, I really think that's a good article. So I will stop talking now. I am attempting to grow this man's beard, but I don't think I will ever get there. But I am open for questions, whatever folks want to talk about in the time we have left.
And I'll just add in here, Mike, I think what we're going to do at this point is we are going to break up our participants and let them ask questions in the breakout rooms. We have everyone broken up based on how long your program has been in existence. So for those of you who have a program that's been in existence 5 years or less, we have you matched up with John Harris. And if you haven't already been introduced to John Harris, he's on the line here with us. He specializes in program evaluation and survey development with a particular focus on assessing match characteristics. He has worked as an independent consultant supporting mentoring programs since 2000. He joined the Mentor Virginia team as a technical assistant consultant in 2016. And then for the other participants who have 5+ years experience, we're going to put you in a breakout room with Mike, and then we'll come back together.
Yes, and I just put in the chat, there is a shared document where there are some guiding questions, and there's a place for notes to be taken for each group. So if each group wants to designate a note taker to just kind of keep track of things in the rooms. So hopefully everybody will be able to get into that.
Okay, great. Looks like we're all back together here. So we'll debrief for a little bit. I want to leave at least 5 minutes at the end for Sarah to kind of go over some closing announcements. But I wanted to start with John first, with your group that have been in existence for 5 years or less. Were there any common pain points or, that you were hearing in your group?
I would summarize thusly. They're young programs who are working to engage with evaluation. And so when I asked about stuff, I saw a lot of kind of meh or shaking heads. So I thought this was a really outstanding opportunity for folks to get a sense of what that would entail and think about doing it in a really stepwise, manageable, feasible fashion. We did have one super specific question, kind of a broad integrated question. So I encouraged him to reach out to me after. And anybody who feels like they would like to do that, I'm available for that.
Great. Anyone else that was in that group want to ask a question or have a comment?
I would just say if folks reach out to John with a question, feel free to copy me on that as well. I can put my email in the chat here in a minute. Happy to answer any questions we didn't get to here in real time.
Thank you, Mike.
In our group, we had a good discussion around kind of, a couple of folks had experience doing working with external evaluators. We talked a little bit about kind of continuous improvement approaches a little bit. And right when we wrapped, Megan had a good question around, well, what are folks measuring, as outcomes? How do you choose, what are the right things to look at? One thing I didn't talk about, but you can find in that measurement guidance toolkit is we included, and I forget what we called it, so you might have to dig for it a little bit in that toolkit, but it was like the notion, I think mentoring programs suffer, especially ones that work with kind of everybody. Every young person that walks through that door is unique, needless to say. They all bring different circumstances and assets and struggles and webs of support into that program. But the problem is when we evaluate programs, we ask every kid, well, how'd you do with your grades? Or how'd you do with your relationships with your peers? Or how are you feeling about, are you depressed or whatever it is, that you've decided to evaluate? Well, but if only half the kids worked on anything related to academics, that means half of them aren't going to improve at all. And so I think a lot of the benefit of mentoring programs gets washed out by the way we evaluate them. We just simply assume that, that every kid's having a similar enough experience that they'd all either improve or not. And so we've provided a tool in there that allows you to kind of evaluate, I think it's called like the goal-directed measurement tool or something to that effect, that basically treats every match as an intervention unique unto itself. In that at some point in the course of the year, the mentor and the young person probably agree to work on something together, right? Whether that's staying out of trouble or doing better in school or looking into a career path or whatever it is that they want to work on. It allows you to assess whether that match achieved what that match wanted to achieve, right? So basically, a young person sets a goal. There's 10 sub-steps to that goal. Well, did you get through all 10? Did you get stuck on number 2? If you do that for every young person in your program, you can then tell a global story of like, hey, 95% of the young people in our program achieved the core goal that they set out to work on with their mentor last year. It's a different way of thinking about program success, but I think it avoids that problem where a lot of your outcomes get washed away because you're asking kids to report on something that they didn't really work on with their mentor. So I just wanted to throw that out there as kind of an alternative way of thinking about that.
Thank you, Mike. I know we really appreciate that, looking at that individualized approach. And also when you brought in about the human-centered outcomes and looking at those versus those policy goals that sometimes young people aren't in control of, as you said, from different things in their environment. I hope that at this point you guys have gotten some questions in, but like I said, feel free to email Mike and John or us afterwards. Sarah's going to get to a few announcements as well. And I'm going to also put a survey in the chat box for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. And then we have a closing poll right after these couple of closing announcements here. So just do know that when we ask for your feedback, we do use it to help inform who we're bringing on, what topics we're kind of providing for our polls that we do where y'all pick the topics we talk about. So please do let us know how we're doing. Our August community coffee hour is going to be about grant writing using asset-based language and how to have difficult conversations with funders. So we're really excited about this topic, and we'll have some great guest speakers on to kind of chat about this as well. So that's August 11th. I did want to just kind of shout out, I think it's been mentioned in a couple different ways at this point, but we do offer no-cost consulting around evaluation. So really any of the things that we've talked about today, John Harris is on our team of consultants, and we have some other folks on our team as well. So that is an area where you can, if you're interested in kind of doing some more work and going deeper and not having to do it all entirely, by yourself or with your team, we do have support that is available to you. And then I also just wanted to, Mike mentioned the National Quality Mentoring System. So this is something that we are actively, open for programs who want to kind of start to explore this as an opportunity to kind of use it as part of your evaluation process. If you want to kind of, learn more about it, we do have some open slots for this kind of going into this fall. And we have a couple of programs who are actually on this call who have been through the process before, but it results in an improvement and innovation plan, which can be really helpful as you're kind of thinking about, what goals you want to work on as a program kind of going forward. And then I'm going to stop sharing and do a quick poll so we can pick our topic for September. So let me go ahead and launch this. Hopefully you all are seeing that. So which topic are you most interested in discussing for our September coffee hour? We've got preparing mentors for careers, strategies for community engagement and building referral networks, and then managing risk and uncertainty in mentoring programs. Give folks a couple seconds here to fill that out. All right. So it looks like the winning topic there is strategies for community engagement and building referral networks. So that is what will be our September topic. So thank you all for joining us today. I will be sharing the slides and a recording of today's conversation in the follow-up email. And we will hope to see you next month for our August coffee hour. Thanks, everyone.